I remember the moment with a clarity that feels almost cruel, as if my mind refuses to let me soften the edges of that night. My name is Eleanor Hayes, but everyone calls me Ellie, and I was 28 years old the evening my brother reminded me exactly where I stood in my own family. It was supposed to be a simple Friday dinner at my parents' house, the kind Margaret, my mother, insisted on every so often, always framed as a chance to reconnect, to remember where we come from. The dining room smelled like rosemary chicken and warm bread, and sunlight filtered through the tall windows in soft amber stripes, painting the walls with a false sense of peace. Chris sat across from me, my older brother by 5 years, the self-proclaimed heir to the Hayes legacy he believed existed solely for his benefit. His hair perfectly styled, his gold watch catching the light every time he lifted his wine glass. He looked like a man who believed life owed him applause just for breathing. I had been quiet all evening, not out of discomfort, but by choice. Silence has always been my armor, a lesson my grandparents taught me long before they left this world, and entrusted me with the $3 million they worked their whole lives to build. To me, that money was not luck or accident or privilege. It was trust. It was legacy. It was belief. It was every quiet nod they gave me when I chose books over gossip, restraint over tantrums, effort over entitlement. Dessert had just arrived, a velvet cake, deep red, like a warning whispered beneath frosting. That was when Chris leaned back, tapped his fork against his plate, and with a smirk that already felt like humiliation brushing against my skin, said Ellie, "I think it is time we talk about the inheritance." My chest tightened. My parents exchanged a glance. One of those silent marital signals that say more than words ever could. "You need to sign it over," he continued like he was asking me to pass the salt. $3 million is too much responsibility for someone your age. And honestly, it belongs with the rightful steward of the family assets. He paused to smile at our parents, then at me. Me. I stared at him, searching his face for irony, for humor, for anything human. There was none. "The trust is mine," I said, my voice steady as steel dipped in ice. "Grandmother and grandfather left it to me." Chris scoffed like I had told him the sky was purple. My mother sipped her wine, refusing to look at me, and my father adjusted his cufflinks like boredom was pulling at him. And in that moment, I knew exactly what this was: not a discussion, not a misunderstanding, but an ambush. "You were always their favorite," my mother muttered, not quite loud enough to seem intentional, but not quiet enough to be accidental. Chris leaned forward, elbows on the table, every muscle in his face tightening with entitlement. "Sign it over," he repeated. "I am the one who deserves it. I will take care of the family legacy. You will just waste it." I let out a slow breath. "No." A single syllable, clean, sharp, final. For a heartbeat, silence wrapped the room. Then the world exploded. Chris shot to his feet, his chair scraping across the floor like a scream. His hand slammed against the table's silverware, jumping plates, rattling my wine glass, trembling in place before it tipped. "You don't say no to me," he hissed. "I just did." The words slid from my tongue, like truth finally given permission to breathe. He lunged. His hand grabbed my arm, fingers digging into flesh, and then his palm crashed across my cheek with a force that stunned me. Pain bloomed hot and fast, my head snapping sideways, my lips splitting against my teeth. My wine glass fell shattered, and the dark red liquid bled across the floor like a stain the evening itself could not contain. For a second, the room froze. Not in shock, but in certainty. Like, this was the moment everyone had secretly known was coming. My mother laughed first, a light laugh, bored and dismissive. "Oh, Ellie, don't be dramatic. It was just a joke." My father shook his head, chuckling as if I were a child overreacting to spilled juice. Chris stood over me, chest heaving, eyes wild, as if striking me was not shameful but justified. And in that stillness, humiliation cut deeper than pain. I touched my lip, felt the warm slickness of blood, and lifted my eyes to meet theirs. Something shifted inside me, slow and cold, like a door in my chest closing forever. I did not cry. I did not scream. Instead, I pushed my chair back, rose to my feet with a calm that scared even me, and walked toward the door. Each heel step felt like a heartbeat, deliberate and final. A tiny drop of blood fell from my chin to the polished wood, and I watched it hit like punctuation. My mother rolled her eyes. My father sighed like I was exhausting him. Chris muttered the word ungrateful under his breath. I did not look back. Instead, I gathered every piece of dignity they tried to strip from me and carried it with me as I stepped into the cool night air. The door closed behind me with a soft click, deceptively gentle, and in that sound, I heard an ending and a beginning. They thought they could take what was mine. They thought they could break me into obedience. They forgot who raised me. My grandparents taught me that quiet strength wins wars. I walked to my car, tasting iron and resolve, and I made a promise as sacred as the trust they tried to steal. It would be the last time anyone laid a hand on me, and the first night I chose power over blood. When I stepped into my apartment that night, the world felt hollow, like someone had turned down the volume on existence itself. It was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your skin instead of soothing you. I closed the door behind me and just stood there with my keys still in my hand, staring at nothing, feeling the ache in my cheek pulse with each heartbeat. I am not sure how long I stood like that, frozen in a moment that refused to release me. Time stopped feeling like time and instead stretched into something shapeless and heavy. My apartment has always been my sanctuary, my own chosen space built on independence and earned peace. Yet that night it felt foreign, like I had walked into someone else's life, someone else's pain. I finally moved slowly, as if my bones remembered how to function before my mind did. I went to the bathroom and turned on the light. It was too bright. It made everything real. I looked at myself in the mirror. My lip was swollen, a thin, dried streak of blood tracing downward like a signature of humiliation. My cheek had the faintest outline of a hand, not obvious yet, but present red, blooming under the skin like a bruise being whispered into existence. I lifted my fingers to touch it and winced, not from the physical pain, but from the realization that he did it without hesitation. Chris had hit me like it was his right, like I was an obstacle, not a person. And my parents had laughed. The memory came back sharp and sudden, replaying in my mind like a scene I could not stop watching. His hand rising, the impact, the taste of metal, the sound of a glass breaking. My mother's laugh. There are hurts that scream, and there are hurts that whisper. This one whispered. It whispered betrayal. It whispered disbelief. It whispered a question that sank into me like a stone dragged under water. Am I worth so little to them? I grabbed an ice pack from the freezer and pressed it against my cheek. The cold bit into me, but I welcomed it. Pain anchored me. Hurt reminded me I was still here, still breathing. I sat on the kitchen stool, ice in hand, staring at the wall while the refrigerator hummed gently, unaware that my life had snapped along a fault line I never wanted to see. I tried to cry, but the tears would not come. They stayed somewhere inside, locked behind pride or shock, or maybe both. Crying felt like surrender, and I was not ready to surrender to what they had done. I was not ready to give them that victory. My phone buzzed on the counter. I did not want to look, but I also could not ignore it. Messages popped up. From my mother, "You embarrassed the family tonight. Do better." Then from my father, "You should not provoke him when you know he is under pressure." And then the final blow from Chris. "You forced my hand. Give up the money and we will be fine. We will all move on." In that moment, the numbness shifted. It did not disappear, but it cracked at the edges and something fiercer seeped through. Not rage. Not yet. Resolve. I set the phone face down as if I could trap their entitlement beneath the black screen. I reached for my water glass, but my hand shook slightly. Not out of fear, but adrenaline stored with nowhere to go. I stood up, walked to the window, and opened it. The night air washed over me, cool and calm, brushing against the bruise like a soft apology the world offered when people failed. Outside, cars passed, lives continued, neighbors laughed in distant apartments. Somewhere a dog barked. Life moved forward as though the universe had not just shifted under my feet. I whispered to myself, barely audible, more thought than sound. Pain is loud, but humiliation whispers, and its whisper fills every space inside you. I turned from the window and pulled my phone back toward me, not to answer them, but to scroll to the contact labeled Dr. Avery, my therapist, the one person who had taught me boundaries are not cruelty, they are self-respect in action. I typed only 3 words. "Something happened tonight." She responded almost instantly. "I am here. Do you want to talk now or tomorrow morning?" I stared at the message, gratitude tightening my throat. I typed back, "Tomorrow morning. I need to think." She wrote, "I am proud of you for reaching out. You are not alone. Ellie." I put the phone down again, softer this time. I was not alone. Not entirely. There were people who valued me, saw me, heard me. My grandparents, my therapist, a small circle of friends who would have defended me without hesitation. I pulled the ice pack away and touched my cheek again. The swelling felt heavier now, the bruise settling in like an unwelcome guest. But this time I did not feel fragile. I felt still. And in that stillness, something inside me aligned. I was not broken. I was not crushed. I was stunned. Yes, bruised, yes, but not broken. There is a kind of strength that only surfaces in the quiet aftermath of being hurt. The kind that does not roar but breathes deep and decides. The kind that does not ask for justice but plans it. That night, in the soft hum of my apartment, in the stillness of disbelief, I made a promise. They would never touch my dignity again. And not because they suddenly learned to respect me, but because I would teach them what consequences feel like when delivered by someone they underestimated. I placed the melting ice pack in the sink, washed my face gently, and went to bed. Sleep did not come easily, but it came eventually, and as I drifted off, I did not replay the slap anymore. I replayed the moment after, the way I walked out, the way power settled in my bones when the door closed. They hurt me, they dismissed me, but they woke something they did not expect. Quiet does not mean weak. Calm does not mean passive. And tomorrow, when the sun rose, I would begin the work of reclaiming everything they tried to take from me, piece by piece, strength by strength, truth by truth. Growing up in the Hayes household was like living under 2 different suns, one that warmed and one that burned, and I learned early which one belonged to me and which one belonged to my brother Chris. He was the chosen one from the moment he breathed his first air, the golden sun, the child our parents paraded like a trophy polished daily. I remember being 5 small sitting on the living room carpet with my dolls while Chris, already loud and commanding at 10, strutted around with a toy sword pretending he was some great conqueror. Our father would watch him with pride, glowing in his eyes while I sat quietly in the corner, hoping someone might notice the drawing I had worked on for hours. They did not. They never did. Chris won awards for participation and they bought him ice cream to celebrate. I won first place in my school spelling bee and my mother said, "That is nice, dear, but do not brag. You do not want to overshadow your brother." I learned then that shrinking myself made the world easier for everyone else, everyone except me. Chris was destined in their eyes. He was the future CEO, the heir to a legacy our family talked about like it was carved on stone tablets handed down from the heavens, instead of just a comfortable middle-class existence in suburban Georgia. My grandparents, however, saw the world differently. They saw through charm and noise. They valued quiet discipline, patience, and work done without applause. When I spent summers at their house, they did not fill my days with demands or pressure. They let me read under the willow tree, bake bread with my grandmother, help my grandfather in his garden, and listen to stories about building something meaningful with humility. My grandmother used to stroke my hair, whispering, "Quiet strength wins wars, Ellie. Loud pride only wins crowds." I did not understand it fully then. Not until I was older, but I felt something warm and fierce take root in me every time she said it. Chris never visited much, and when he did not listen. He would demand attention, cut my grandfather off mid-sentence, roll his eyes when told to help with chores, and spend most of the time complaining about being bored. He was treated like a prince, so he believed service was beneath him. Meanwhile, I learned how to knead dough, how to keep flowers alive, how to stitch torn fabric, how to be steady when life was not. At school, Chris coasted while teachers excused him because he was charming and loud, and his parents were always eager to paint him as exceptional. I earned straight A's, joined clubs, won scholarships. Every time I brought home an achievement, my mother would smile politely and say, "That is good, Ellie, keep yourself busy." Then she would turn to Chris and ask, "Sweetheart, do you need anything? Do you feel supported?" When we turned 18 and I received multiple college acceptance letters, my father sat me down and said something I will never forget. "Do not get your hopes too high, Ellie. Ambition is admirable, but your brother is the one we are investing in. We expect him to carry the family name." I was expected to be supportive, gentle, humble, a shadow applauding someone else's spotlight. I left for college with a scholarship and a suitcase of thrift store clothes while Chris stayed home claiming he needed a year to find his passion. He found bars and late-night parties and excuses. I found classrooms and libraries and grind. I worked part-time, studied full-time, called my grandparents every Sunday, and never once asked my parents for help. They sent money to Chris, though, proudly, as if funding his exploration of nothingness was proof of good parenting. When my grandparents passed, I was 22. Losing them felt like losing the only steady foundation I had ever known. I sat at the funeral between my parents, hands tight around the letter my grandmother had written me her final gift. In it, she wrote, "We leave you our trust, not because you are the favorite, but because you are the one who understands value, not just cost. Protect it. Protect yourself. Build a life that honors who you are." Chris was furious when the will was read. He argued in the lawyer's office voice, raised veins standing out on his neck, demanding fairness, insisting he deserved it. My parents backed him like they always did. The lawyer, a kind older man with silver hair, calmly repeated, "They chose your sister. They chose her intentionally." That day, something shifted permanently between us. Chris stopped pretending to tolerate me. He saw me not as his sister, but as the obstacle between him and a dream of wealth and control he believed was rightfully his. And my parents never forgave me for being chosen. They did not say it aloud, but every glance, every sigh, every dismissive comment was heavy with the truth. They believed I had stolen what belonged to their son. They forgot blood runs deeper than preference. They forgot loyalty should not be conditional on ego. But I did not forget. I remembered every time my mother brushed my accomplishments aside. I remembered every time my father told me not to make Chris look bad. I remembered every birthday where he got the big celebration and I got a polite dinner and a card. I remembered every whispered compliment from my grandparents telling me I was enough when the world around me tried to shrink me. I remembered who loved me and who simply used me as a mirror for their pride. And standing in my apartment that night, cheek-swollen lip, bruised humiliation resting in my bones like cold water, I saw every moment with new clarity. This was not sudden. This was not one slap. This was a lifetime of being told my worth was negotiable and my dignity was optional. The golden sun had always shone even when he did not earn the light, and I had always been expected to stand quietly in the shadow of his shine. Until now. Quiet does not mean dim. Gentle does not mean weak. Being overlooked does not mean being blind. They thought they raised a girl who would bow her head and move aside forever. What they raised was a woman who learned patience, resilience, and when necessary, how to let a kingdom fall that was never built on truth. And now the golden sun would face a truth no entitlement could shield him from. The light that crowns an undeserving man will burn him eventually. And I was ready to strike the match fate had placed in my hand years ago. The thing about money is that people think it changes you, but the truth is, money only reveals what was buried beneath the surface all along. Wealth sharpens character the way pressure sharpens a blade. Some cut through darkness with purpose, and others simply cut whoever stands closest. My grandparents understood that better than anyone. They did not grow up rich. They built everything from scraps and sweat from long days and humble beginnings, stacking small choices into a legacy brick by brick. When I was little, I would listen to them talk about the early days, how my grandfather worked 2 jobs while my grandmother stretched every dollar like it was a sacred artifact. They did not believe in waste. They did not believe in showing off. They believed in dignity, thrift, and truth earned through effort. They believed in education, but more than that, they believed in discernment. They taught me quiet thinking, self-discipline, and the kind of patience most people only discover after losing something precious. I spent summers on their porch shelling peas and reading books while cicadas sang the heat into the air. My grandmother would sit beside me knitting and humming, pausing occasionally to say something simple but profound. Money is a tool, Ellie, never a throne, never a leash. My grandfather liked numbers, but he loved integrity more. He would open his ledger and walk me through expenses as if revealing a map. We save here because we dream there. We do not buy to impress. We buy to invest. You do not need to be loud to be powerful. That was his mantra. I did not realize then that he was quietly crafting my spine from steel. Meanwhile, Chris would breeze in on the rare occasion he visited them, barely staying long enough to sit down, calling their house boring, acting like he was too important for their world. He wanted instant gratification, quick applause, fast success. The very things they believed were traps disguised as gifts. My grandmother once told me entitlement is hunger that no wealth can feed. When they passed away, I was heartbroken, but not surprised when I learned they had left everything to me. The trust, the assets, their home to sell or keep as I wished, and a letter sealed with my grandmother's favorite lavender wax. I opened it alone in my dorm room, my hands shaking not from greed but from grief. Her handwriting looped gently across the page like she was still speaking to me. Our darling Ellie, we have watched you live with humility and strength. You honor yourself without hurting others. You build rather than demand. Our legacy is not money. Our legacy is wisdom, dignity, and earned pride. We trust you to decide what to do with what we built. Use it to lift, never to chain. And then the line that changed everything. If anyone tells you this should have been someone else's, know that we saw their character long before they showed it to the world. We leave this to you, not because you asked, but because you never would. My hands trembled reading that. The words felt too big for me, too heavy like a crown I did not feel ready to wear. I sat on my bed, clutching that letter, and cried into my pillow, not because I was rich, but because I felt seen in a way that terrified me. Someone believed in me so fiercely it felt like my bones had been given an oath. But my parents did not see wisdom in the inheritance. They saw insult. They saw rejection. They saw my grandparents choosing me over the son they worshipped, and for them, that was unforgivable. My mother tried to hide her resentment, but anger leaks through tone the way truth leaks through cracks in a lie. My father did not hide it at all. He demanded to know if I was going to do the right thing and sign control to Chris. I refused not because I wanted to win, but because surrendering would betray everything they had taught me. They trusted me. I would not break that. It was never about the money. It was about honor. It was about responsibility. But tell people that and they laugh. The world believes women protect emotion and men protect wealth. My grandparents rejected that myth. They looked at character. They saw me. They saw the discipline, the quiet grind the nights I studied while others slept, the patience to build myself instead of pretending I was already complete. They also saw the cracks in Chris that everyone else excused. They saw arrogance masquerading as confidence dependency, dressed as leadership ego, mistaken for potential. They saw what my parents refused to see. Success does not come to those who demand it. It comes to those who prepare for it, often in silence. And so they left the weight of their legacy to me, trusting that I would carry it properly. They never imagined it would turn into a battlefield within my own bloodline. But maybe they did. Maybe the line in the letter was their warning. Know that we saw their character long before they showed it to the world. And now, Chris had shown it. He did not just want the money. He believed it was stolen from him. He believed hitting me was justified because in his mind, I had taken something that belonged to him by birthright. That is the thing about entitlement. It turns gratitude into grievance and turns opportunity into weapon. Standing in my apartment in the quiet after the slap, I took out that letter again. I read the last words, slowly letting them settle into my shaken spirit. Protect yourself. Build a life that honors who you are. They had not just left me finances. They had left me a mandate. I pressed the letter to my chest and breathed. They were gone, yes, but they were here. In my spine, in my decisions, in my refusal to bow. Some inherit money. I inherited purpose. And now I would honor them the only way that mattered. I would not surrender my worth to people who tried to erase it. I would not hand my life to those who never learned to carry their own. They thought they could guilt me into giving up my inheritance. Instead, they triggered the woman my grandparents raised. Silent, patient, unbreakable. I whispered into the stillness, almost like a prayer to the past. I will protect what you trusted me with, and I will protect myself, not with anger, with truth, with boundaries sharper than any slap. The world forgets what quiet strength looks like until it stands. The morning after felt unreal, like my life had been dipped in cold water and frozen in place. I woke up to sunlight crawling across my bedroom wall, gentle and warm, so painfully opposite of the memory burning in my cheek. I touched my lip tender and slightly swollen, and for a moment I wondered if it had all been some twisted nightmare. But no, reality sits differently in the body than dreams do. Pain has weight, humiliation has texture. My cheek pulsed, and that pulse said everything loud and clear. It happened. He hit me. My family laughed, and now the world expected me to breathe like nothing had shifted. I made coffee and stood staring out my kitchen window while steam curled into the air. Outside, people walked their dogs. Sprinklers clicked in nearby yards. Someone revved a motorcycle in the distance. Life did not pause for my heartbreak. Life moved forward shamelessly. My phone buzzed. For one foolish second, I thought maybe, just maybe, someone had apologized. But when I looked, 3 messages sat there waiting like traps. My mother first. Ellie, let us not blow one moment out of proportion. Families fight. You need to be mature enough to move on. Do not make a scene. Then my father. Your brother was stressed. You know how pressure affects him. You should not have antagonized him. We expect better from you. Better. That word stung. It always did. And then, Chris. No apology, no hesitation, just pure entitlement dripping off the screen. Sign the paperwork this week. We cannot drag this out. You know the money is meant for the family anyway. It was never just yours. My hand shook not with anger, but with pure disbelief. They truly believed that. They truly believed my grandparents were wrong, that I was merely holding something that belonged in their greedy hands. It was like they lived in a world where logic never entered and fairness was a foreign language. And worse than the slap itself was the assumption that I should swallow it quietly, pretend it never happened, the Hayes tradition, sweep the ugliness under the rug and call it family strength, smile for the neighbors, protect the image, protect the son, silence the daughter. I placed my phone face down on the counter and breathed slowly, counting each inhale like a thread sewing my composure back together. I was not going to respond. Not yet. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strategy. For the first few days, I moved through my routine like a ghost haunting my own life. Work emails, gym sessions, dinner alone, nights staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over. Not just the slap, the laughter, the dismissal. The dismissal hurt more than the hit. Pain fades. Disrespect festers. Twice that week, I found myself standing in the bathroom mirror, staring at the faint bruise blooming like a dark confession across my cheekbone. Each day, it faded a little more, but what it represented did not. Shame does not bruise the skin. Shame bruises the soul, and something inside me hardened as the physical mark faded like steel, cooling into shape. On Wednesday evening, I sat on my couch reading the letter from my grandmother again, letting her words sink into me like warmth by a fire. Protect yourself. Honor who you are. Every sentence felt like armor. Every memory of her voice felt like a shield. Meanwhile, my family continued their theater routine, pretending righteousness while rotting beneath the surface. My mother left a voicemail, her tone bright and falsely cheerful. Ellie, sweetheart, why do you insist on being stubborn? Forgive and move forward. Move. It is not healthy to hold grudges. Come over Sunday. Family dinner should not be tense. Translation. Come be quiet again so we can continue imagining we are good people. My father texted that he reserved a table at the club Saturday and expected me to attend. Image first. Always image first. They acted as if I had been unreasonable, as if I owed them my calm obedience, as if their comfort mattered more than my dignity. And Chris. He had gone right back to planning his imaginary empire, sending me screenshots of real estate listings for his future office, talking about investors he planned to meet, concluding each message with "do the right thing." 4 words that tasted like poison. I spent the week declining invitations, ignoring calls, letting my silence become a mirror. When the world expects you to shrink, growing quietly is a rebellion. One afternoon at the grocery store, I stood in line behind a grandmother gently wiping sticky ice cream from her granddaughter's face. The little girl giggled and hugged her. The grandmother kissed her forehead and whispered something soft. My throat tightened. Love looks like that. Care looks like that. Family should look like that. I had never expected perfection from mine, but I had expected decency, safety, respect. Instead, I received entitlement violence and a demand for silence. I went home, sat on the edge of my bed, and realized something sharp and true. They had not just hurt me. They had underestimated me. They mistook quiet for weak. They mistook compliance for loyalty. They mistook kindness for surrender. But quiet does not mean powerless. Still does not mean stuck. And kindness does not obligate me to tolerate cruelty. The bruise was fading, but my resolve was sharpening. I opened my laptop and began to organize the documents tied to my inheritance, reviewing trust terms, communication logs, legal rights. I did not do it from anger. I did it from clarity. My grandparents had chosen me for a reason. They had trusted me for a reason. And I would not let the people who belittled my worth rewrite my destiny with their arrogance. The week ended with another text from my mother. "We expect you here Sunday. Attendance is important. Bring a smile." I looked at it, felt a slow, steady fire rise in my chest, and typed one sentence. I will not be attending. No explanation, no softness, no apology for existing. I closed my phone and sat back. In the silence of my apartment, I felt something shift. That week they pretended the violence never happened, but I remembered every second, and I was not pretending anything anymore. This was not a broken moment. This was the moment I stopped bending. The bruise might fade. I would not. There comes a moment in every wounded person's life when pain stops trembling and becomes purpose, when humiliation stops echoing and becomes clarity sharp enough to cut through every illusion you once held. That moment came for me the morning after my mother's last text, the one demanding my presence and my smile as though I were a trained pet kept for family optics. I sat at my small kitchen table, sunlight warming the wood, a mug of black coffee cooling untouched beside me. My cheek, finally losing its bruise, felt strangely symbolic, as if the physical mark fading only made the internal vow sharpen. They thought I would fold. They thought I would bow my head, swallow the insult, the slap, the laughter, and return to my place as the silent giver of peace while they feasted on entitlement. But pain had not broken me. It had clarified me. I opened my laptop and pulled up the trust documents, scrolling through the legal terms with steady eyes. My grandparents had protected me in ways I did not fully appreciate until now. The trust was airtight, insulated from interference, built with foresight and love and an understanding of character that bordered on prophetic. Chris could demand, threaten, beg, stomp, slap, manipulate, and scream until his voice cracked. It would never be his. And yet it was not enough to simply keep the trust safe. I needed to protect my life from them, my peace, my future, my safety. I typed a message to a corporate attorney recommended by a colleague. There is a situation involving inheritance pressure and family aggression. I need to fortify legal boundaries. Within 20 minutes, she replied, "Firm appointment available tomorrow morning. Come in and bring documents." That was the first brick. Then I called my bank and flagged my account with a note that no joint inquiries or third-party claim attempts would be honored. The representative asked if there had been attempts to access funds without permission. "Not yet," I said, "but there will be." She responded with a tone I recognized instantly, a quiet respect only given to those who speak not from panic but from certainty. "Consider your account secured, Ms. Hayes." I hung up and felt a steady heat circle my chest, not rage, but resolve. I opened another tab and drafted an email to my financial advisor informing him that all access privileges for family members, even inquiry privileges, were revoked. For good measure, I scheduled a meeting to discuss protective restructuring options and asset insulation. This was not a tantrum. This was not revenge born of pettiness. This was preservation, boundary as protection, silence as strategy. Then I opened a note on my phone and began writing everything that had happened. Date, time, place, words spoken, the slap, the blood, the laughter, the messages afterward. I did not know yet if I would need proof, but I was not leaving anything to chance. I would not be blindsided. Not again. Documentation is not vengeance. It is armor. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a call from my father. I let it ring, then ring again. Then again. He left a voicemail dripping with irritation masquerading as concern. Ellie, we expect you to act responsibly. Money changes people. Do not let it change you. Do not be selfish. You are being unreasonable. I smiled then, a small, bitter curve of the lips I had never worn before. They thought money had changed me. They did not realize it had revealed them. Next came a text from Chris. You cannot stonewall us. This will not end well for you. For me. The arrogance in those 4 words would have once made me shake with rage. Now they simply confirmed my direction. People reveal their greed most clearly when they believe they are entitled to what is not theirs. I replied with the first message I had sent him since the slap. Do not contact me again about my inheritance. It is not yours. His response arrived seconds later. You owe the family. I stared at the screen and felt a calm unlike anything I had ever known settle into my bones. I owe myself, I typed. Nothing more. When I hit send, the silence that followed tasted like freedom. That evening, I sat on my couch and felt my life rearranging itself in quiet, powerful ways. I thought of my grandparents, of my grandmother's hands kneading bread, of my grandfather balancing numbers with a steady grin. They had not left me wealth. They had left me sovereignty. And sovereignty does not negotiate with tyranny. I stood and walked to the bathroom, turning on the light and facing my reflection again. The bruise was nearly gone, but the memory had not faded. My face looked different somehow now, stronger around the eyes, more defined around the mouth, like grief and clarity had carved away softness and left truth. I whispered into the mirror, not for theatrics, but because speaking it aloud made it real. I will not be your ATM, not your savings account, not your quiet servant, not your disposable daughter. I am done. The words felt like iron, and then a final vow shaped itself in my mind and slipped from my mouth, steady and sure. He hit me for money. Now he will learn the cost of touching me. If vengeance had visited me in my younger years, it might have been loud, reckless, frantic. But now it simmered deep and still like water heating under a sealed lid. I did not need to scream. I did not need to warn. I needed only to move. Quiet strength wins wars. My grandparents had given me that lesson. My brother had given me the battlefield. I backed away from the mirror, turned off the light, and walked toward the future with steps so precise they felt like fate guiding my feet. I would not run. I would not hide. I would not ask. I would act. A Hayes by birth, their descendant by choice, but no longer their victim. This was not the end of a chapter. It was the beginning of a reckoning. Revenge, when done right, is never loud at the beginning. It does not arrive in chaos or fury or trembling hands. It arrives in quiet preparation, in paperwork filed neatly and calls made calmly in steps so measured and precise they do not look like vengeance until it is far too late to stop the fall. The week after I severed myself from their expectations, I transformed my silence into structure. I woke up early that Monday morning, made coffee strong enough to steady my heartbeat, and sat at my desk with my laptop open and a legal pad beside me. No shaking hands, no tears, no frantic pacing. My rage had cooled into discipline, and discipline is far more dangerous than anger ever could be. I reviewed my list not once but 3 times the way my grandfather taught me when he used to check ledgers with fingers that had known both labor and precision. First task, secure my financial fortresses. My bank accounts already had extra protections, but I called again, ensuring there was now a permanent verbal note. No family member, no matter who, no matter what story they told, was to have access or influence. I requested written confirmation. The representative's tone shifted when I explained why. A slap for money, a family aligned against dignity. She did not gasp or pity me. She simply said, "I will make sure no one takes advantage of you, Miss Hayes." It felt like another brick in the wall I was building around my peace. Second task, call my attorney. She greeted me with calm professionalism, but when I told her everything, her voice shifted just slightly like steel sharpening. "This is financial coercion layered with emotional intimidation," she said. "You are right to act now." She scheduled paperwork to ensure that not only was my trust protected, but also any future attempts to manipulate me into surrendering assets would be documented as coercive intent. She also recommended filing a no harassment boundary notice not dramatic enough to trigger legal war yet, but official enough to warn. Then she asked, "Would you like to explore a civil liability route for the physical assault?" I sat silent for a moment. The bruise had faded, but its memory still lived under my skin. I did not want to sue him for pain. That would be emotional revenge, and I had evolved past that. But a record, a paper trail, something that says on an official file that he crossed a line and the world noticed, yes, that mattered. We set the plan in motion. Third task, retrieve what was mine quietly. Over the years, I had helped my parents with things not large sums but enough. A car payment loan here, a deposit on their lake weekend rental house there. Bills I had paid without recognition because loyalty once felt like love. Loyalty now felt like a chain I needed to unlock. I gathered every receipt, every bank statement, every record of generosity. I did not plan to demand repayment. That would make me petty. But I did plan to revoke any responsibility tied to their finances. If they fell, they would fall on their own weight, not mine. I emailed my advisor again and instructed him to withdraw my name from any shared liability forms connected to my parents or my brother. One by one, I severed financial arteries they did not realize were keeping them alive. I did not warn. I simply removed. Quiet does not mean passive. Quiet is strategic. Fourth task, protect my physical world. I contacted building management and updated my emergency contact file. No family member should ever be allowed into my building, not even in an emergency. I asked for my apartment access list to be wiped and restricted. If they ever tried showing up, they would meet locked doors instead of answers. Fifth task, emotional boundary. I booked sessions with my therapist and told her everything. I did not cry through it. I narrated. She listened, nodding, her voice steady as she said, "Hurt like this becomes power when you refuse to let it turn you cruel." "I do not want to be cruel," I told her. "I just will not be used again." She smiled softly. Power without cruelty is the rarest kind. Sixth task, prepare for future battlefields. I made a folder labeled Documentation. Inside it, I saved screenshots of every message, copies of legal confirmations, notes from calls, dates, times, facts. This folder was not anger. It was insurance. Proof that if they pushed further, I would not meet them with emotion. I would meet them with evidence. My grandparents used to say, justice without strategy is just noise. I could finally hear their voices not in mourning, but in approval. Seventh task, rebuild the parts of me they tried to break. I cooked myself dinner slowly, deliberately. I played classical music. I wrote in my journal. Not about pain, but about direction. Who do I want to be when this storm clears strong? Unshaken, untouchable, free. As I cleaned up that night, my phone buzzed again. Chris, of course. "Are you ready to talk like an adult?" Yet I stared at the message. Once, it would have sent shockwaves through my chest. Now, it felt like noise coming from far away. I typed no reply. Silence is not avoidance. Silence is control. Moments later, another message arrived. "You're being dramatic. This is family." I closed my messages. Family is not a shield for abuse. Family does not demand surrender. Family does not slap and laugh. He did not want family. He wanted access. He wanted ownership. And for the first time, he would face life without siphoning from my stability. As evening faded into night, I sat by my window with tea steaming softly beside me. The moon stretched thin and quiet across the sky. I felt no tremor in my hands, no ache in my chest, just steadiness. Vengeance was not calling my name. Integrity was. But do not mistake calm for softness. Calm is where decisions sharpen. Calm is where battles are won before they begin. They once mistook my silence for surrender. Now they would learn what my silence truly means. It means calculation. It means fortification. It means I am done being your resource, your cushion, your silent benefactor. Revenge is not rage. Revenge is paperwork. Revenge is boundaries. Revenge is reclaiming what they never appreciated. I closed my laptop, inhaled slowly, exhaled slower. War is loud when fools start it. Victory is quiet when wise people finish it. The first crack in their perfect illusion did not arrive with thunder or shouting or confrontation. It arrived quietly in the most unassuming form possible. A white envelope with a bank logo stamped neatly in the corner, resting in my parents' mailbox like a sleeping serpent waiting to strike when discovered. I did not see it happen in person. I did not need to. Sometimes you can feel the shift in the air when consequences begin to stir. I was at my apartment that morning sipping tea and watering the fern by my window when my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Minutes later, a text followed from my father. "Call me. Urgent." I did not hurry. Urgency from people who ignored your pain means little when their comfort finally trembles. I finished watering my plants, rinsed my mug, sat down at my table, and only then pressed play on the voicemail. His voice was strained, frayed at the edges that tone a man uses when he senses his control slipping but does not want to believe it. "Ellie, this is unacceptable. I do not know what games you are playing with the bank, but fix it. I expect a call back." So it had begun. I waited a full hour before calling back. When he answered, he did not greet me. He barked. "Why is the bank contacting us about loan guarantee changes? You signed you are responsible. Undo whatever nonsense you pulled." It was almost amusing, the irony of a man who repeatedly told me I owed the family suddenly panicking because the financial umbilical cord he did not know he depended on had been cut. I kept my voice calm, controlled, measured. I removed my name from all liabilities. "That was never your concern." He sputtered, voice rising. "We supported your brother's business because we believed in family. Family should not abandon each other." "I did not abandon anyone," I replied. I removed myself from responsibilities that were never acknowledged, only expected. That is different. He did not like that answer. Entitled people never do. When he paused to gather his outrage into words, I spoke again. "I am not responsible for your debts." Or his. Silence crackled through the phone, thick and heavy, as if the truth had weight, and it finally landed in his chest. Then he tried the oldest tactic in the family script. "You are being emotional, irrational. Fix this, now." "I am not emotional," I replied. "I am free." I hung up. Not out of disrespect, but out of self-respect. Moments later, my phone vibrated again. This time, a text from Chris. "What did you do? My investors are getting nervous." The bank called. "Fix it." My lips curled into the faintest hint of satisfaction. He thought money flowed to him by divine right. He thought opportunity followed him like a loyal dog. He had no idea how much of his cushioned existence rested on assumptions about me. I ignored the message and went for a run. The air was crisp, my lungs burned in the best way, and for the first time in years, my footsteps did not feel like they were running from something but toward something. When I returned home sweaty and tired, there were 6 missed calls from my parents and 3 from my brother, plus a text from my mother dripping with subtle accusation. "Whatever petty thing you are doing needs to stop. You are embarrassing us." Embarrassment, their greatest fear. Not pain, not harm, not injustice, public inconvenience. When pride is built on perception, even a whisper of truth sounds like ruin. Later that afternoon, another message arrived, this time from the bank. Just a courtesy notice that personal guarantees connected to business loan accounts had been updated. It was written politely, professionally, clinically. The world moves on procedure, not emotion. I sat on my couch and traced the edges of the email with my eyes, breathing slowly. This was not revenge. This was clarity restructuring life around dignity. Meanwhile, across town, chaos was undoubtedly brewing. I pictured my mother pacing in the kitchen, clutching pearl necklace with trembling fingers, insisting I was overreacting. I pictured my father red-faced, blaming me for consequences he created by raising entitlement into adulthood like it was virtue. I pictured Chris tearing through phone contacts, calling bankers, calling friends, pretending control he did not have because men raised to believe the world bows to them rarely know what to do when the ground holds firm. Then came the next call. From my parents' vacation home manager. They were confused about a lien update notice. I listened, thanked them for informing me, and said nothing further. I did not need to speak. The truth was speaking for me. The next day, another envelope arrived at my parents' house. Not a bank one this time, but a notice from a property tax office regarding late payment penalties that previously had been automatically covered by a safety fund I once set up. A safety net they never thanked me for, one they never acknowledged because entitlement never sees gifts, only obligations. The net was gone. Reality sharp and cold had arrived in its place. I did not check in with them. I did not call. I sat at a cafe reading a book, sipping matcha, feeling a type of quiet peace I had never known in my younger years. Not the peace of being overlooked, the peace of not belonging to anyone's expectations. The panic texts kept coming. What did you do? Fix this. You are tearing this family apart. Answer me, you selfish girl. How dare you sabotage us? My favorite message, however, came late evening. A short one, a rare one. 2 words. Please call. And yet, despite the softening of tone, I did not respond. Silence is not cruelty. Silence is consequence. They had expected my compliance the way a spoiled child expects dessert after throwing a tantrum. Now they tasted a new ingredient. Absence. Not absence of love, but absence of access. They had mistaken me for a resource. Now they learned resources can withdraw, and the collapse had only just begun. The first envelope arrived. The first financial tremor hit, and in its wake, I did not feel guilt. I felt alignment. They struck me believing I would break. Instead, I became the force that gently removed the illusions holding their world up. Quietly, without shouting, without warning. Collapse does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers one envelope at a time. People imagine confrontations as explosions shouting chaos fists on tables and slammed doors. But real power does not shout. Real power arrives quietly, sits down, folds its hands, and waits for the room to realize who holds the ground beneath its feet. I walked into my parents' home that Sunday afternoon, not because they summoned me, but because I chose to go. The sky outside was gray, the kind of muted weather that makes the world feel expectant. I wore a simple black blazer, hair tied back, no makeup, except the faintest stroke of confidence across my eyes. My phone was fully charged voice memo already set to standby. Documentation is not pettiness, it is insurance. Their hallway smelled like lemon polish and nostalgia that had soured in storage. Family photos lined the walls, most of them featuring Chris, smiling, posing, celebrated. Me smaller in the corners, quiet present, but never centered. Not anymore. I stepped into the dining room where they were waiting. My father sat rigid jaw flexing. My mother clutched her pearl necklace knuckles white, and Chris paced like a storm trapped in too small a space. The moment he saw me, he started, "There she is, finally. About time you stopped acting like a child." I pulled out a chair, sat calmly, looked at him with steady eyes. "I am here." "Speak." He seemed thrown by my composure. Bullying only thrives when the target trembles. A calm target is a wall they slam into. My mother jumped in that high, brittle tone she used whenever image cracked. "Ellie, sweetheart, this whole situation has gotten out of control. We are family. Families do not do this to each other." I had to breathe slowly so I did not laugh from disbelief. Families do not hit each other either, I said softly, or demand money through threats. My father's face darkened. Do not twist the narrative. Your brother made a mistake. A mistake, I repeated. You call assault a mistake. He slammed his fist against the table, silverware rattling. Do not be dramatic. If he meant harm, you would know it. That line, that casual cruelty disguised as reason. I hit record on my phone with one discreet tap under the table. Chris leaned forward, eyes burning with indignation. Ellie, you need to stop whatever games you are playing with the banks. You are putting my future at risk. I met his glare without flinching. Your future is your responsibility. It always was. His face contorted, a flash of the man who slapped me appearing like a ghost in daylight. You owe this family. I kept my voice calm. I owe nothing to people who lay hands on me and laugh. My mother scoffed, waving a delicate hand as if brushing away dust. The slap again. You are obsessed with one moment. Let it go. I looked at her. Really looked, and for the first time saw not authority, not maternal power, but weakness disguised as tradition. Let it go, she repeated. Women in this family have always kept peace. That was when it clicked. This was not about money. This was about generational obedience. I was expected to be silent because silence was the currency of womanhood in their world. My father spoke again, tone lower, threatening under civility. Undo the account changes. Restore the guarantees. Sign over the trust. This ends today. Chris nodded vigorously, expecting compliance like a dog expects a stick to be thrown. I folded my hands, feeling my heartbeat slow. No. The word sat between us like a stone dropped into still water. Chris scoffed. You think you can stand alone against this family. You need us. I tilted my head slightly, almost pitying him. You cannot imagine a life where I do not need you. That is your weakness, not mine. He stepped forward, face tightening. Lower that tone, Ellie. Do not make this worse. I pressed the record button harder beneath my thumb, even though it was already running. I looked him in the eyes, unwavering. You hit me because you believed you could. You demanded money because you believed it was owed. And you expected obedience because obedience is all you have ever known from the women in this family. The room went still. My voice stayed soft, but it carried weight like steel under silk. You do not get to strike me and still expect to inherit my life. My father's mouth dropped open, slightly stunned by the edge in my tone. My mother blinked fast, her certainty cracking. Chris scoffed again, but it was weaker now, uncertain. You think you are powerful because you signed forms. I leaned back. No, I am powerful because I stopped being afraid of disappointing people who never valued me. He opened his mouth to shout, but I raised one hand. Enough. I came prepared. His posture stiffened. What did you bring a tantrum? I pulled my bag onto the table slowly, deliberately, and placed a folded document envelope next to my water glass. Inside were bank confirmations, legal filings, notices of withdrawn guarantees, and a prepared cease contact warning drafted by my attorney if they escalated harassment. But I did not open it. I did not need to. Presence is sometimes louder than proof. I slid the envelope slightly toward them. They stared at it like it was a weapon. In a way, it was. A paper sword. My father's voice cracked. Ellie, what have you done? I finally let emotion bleed into my tone, not anger, but truth carved sharp. What I should have done years ago. I rose slowly, tucking my phone into my blazer, still recording. I looked at all three of them, not as a frightened daughter, not as a disappointed sister, but as a woman who finally understood her worth. You want to talk like family. Then learn what family means. Family protects. Family respects. Family does not hit and laugh. Family does not demand compliance and call it love. My mother whispered, tears threatening, This is cruel. Cruel. I smiled slightly, gently even. No. Cruel was expecting me to bleed quietly. I am simply refusing to bleed anymore. I pushed the chair back, the legs scraping softly across the hardwood floor. My voice lowered to a whisper that cut cleaner than a shout. The days of access are over. I walked toward the door. Chris shouted my name, but it sounded small, like a child losing grip on a toy he always assumed was his. I opened the door without looking back. My final words floated behind me like a quiet storm closing in. The next time you speak to me, it will be with respect, or not at all. Then I added just loud enough to echo, and everything that follows now, you earned. I stepped into the cold air outside and exhaled. Power does not come from taking control of others. Power comes from reclaiming control of yourself. And in that moment, the chapter did not just turn, it locked behind me. Justice does not always arrive with sirens or courtroom speeches or dramatic confessions. Sometimes it arrives quietly through paperwork and consequences, and the slow realization in a man's eyes that the world no longer bends around his ego. A few days after the confrontation, I woke up to a text from Chris that was not angry, not demanding, not dripping entitlement like sour honey. It was short. Call me. We need to talk. But there was an undertone, a tremor, the kind of shaky politeness a person uses when they are standing at the edge of something they never thought they would face accountability. I did not respond. Instead, I brewed coffee, sat by my window, and watched the city come alive outside. Cars humming, neighbors walking dogs, the mundane beauty of a world that kept turning whether one spoiled sun fell or not. Justice was already in motion. Later that morning, my attorney emailed me a forwarded notice that had been sent to Chris's business address, an investor withdrawal confirmation, and formal termination of pending funding. It was couched in polite language corporate people use when saying the truth. Without saying it, concerns regarding risk profile, instability, reputational issues, uncertainty regarding financial structure. But what it really meant was simple. His temper, his entitlement, his sloppy rage, his assumption that no one would hold him accountable. It was all catching up. Over the next week, whispers flowed. A mentor who once bragged about supporting Chris suddenly became distant. A potential business partner withdrew interest. Emails arrived to me from his bank confirming that without my financial backing attached to the loan, his collateral was insufficient. My absence was louder than any confrontation could have been. And that is the truth. Entitled, Men Hate Most Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away and let gravity do the work. Meanwhile, my parents began to feel the ripple. Their country club committee whispered. Their friends asked subtle questions. Why is your daughter distancing herself? Why was there a financial notice linked to you? Why did the Hayes Sons investor pull suddenly image? Their altar, their pride, their weakness. My silence was not public humiliation. It was a mirror. And nothing terrifies people who rely on illusion more than their reflection without polish. The first time I saw my mother after everything she did not smirk or lecture or tilt her head with icy superiority. She looked smaller shoulders, heavy eyes, tired. She reached for me like she was still deciding if she had the right to. Ellie, she said quietly, things are complicated right now. I nodded. Yes, they are. Her eyes glistened. Your brother is struggling. He may lose the business. The lake house might go. Your father is overwhelmed. The club board, she faltered. For the first time in my entire life, I saw my mother lost, and I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not pity, clarity. Her struggle did not move me because it was not born from remorse. It was born from inconvenience. Consequences threaten comfort long before they threaten conscience. I replied calmly, I hope you find solutions. Then I left. No comfort, no apology, no performance. They had never offered me those things. Chris tried one last time to claw back control. He appeared at my building, pacing outside like a man waiting for mercy. When he saw me, he rushed forward, breath unsteady. Ellie, this has gone too far. You are destroying everything we built. I raised an eyebrow. You never built anything. He swallowed hard. His eyes were red, whether from anger or fear or the collapse of delusion, I could not tell. My investors think I am unstable. Banks are backing away. People are gossiping. I need you to undo it. I crossed my arms, voice steady like polished stone. You need to live with the consequences of your actions. He shook his head violently. I apologized. You did not apologize, I corrected. You panicked. That is not the same thing. He stared at me, then truly looked like he was seeing me for the first time, not as his quiet buffer, his background support, his safety net, but as a person with boundaries and agency and spine. Dad always said I deserved everything, he muttered, voice cracking with disbelief at reality's betrayal. I nodded slowly. And that is why you earned nothing. His face fell, and for a moment the arrogance peeled away, and what remained was simply a man who had never grown roots, only entitlement. Then security approached because I had left their number at the front desk. He cannot come up, I told them firmly, and they escorted him away. He did not look back. Later, I received a text. I never thought you would do this to your own brother. I typed slowly, deliberately. I never thought you would hit me and expect me to pay you for it. He did not reply. That night, I sat alone with soft music playing, a candle lit on my table, letting peace settle into the spaces that used to hold fear and disappointment. I thought about my grandparents. I imagined them sitting across from me, smiling with those gentle, knowing eyes. They always knew who I would become. They always knew who Chris would become too. That is why they chose me, not to punish him, but to protect me. And now I was honoring them not through vengeance, but through dignity. Justice had landed not in fire, but in quiet collapse. His fall was not loud. It was hollow. No pride left to cushion it. My rise was not dramatic. It was steady. No permission needed to lift it. I poured a glass of wine, lifted it slightly to the air, and whispered, I kept my promise. Not to them. To myself. You do not need to roar to rise. You do not need to crush someone to climb. Sometimes rising simply means refusing to fall when they try to push you down. And as I sat there calm and whole and untouchable, I realized something profound. They had lost more than money or status. They had lost access to me. And that was a cost no dollar amount could measure. Healing is a strange thing. It does not arrive like a sunrise, predictable and gentle and bright. It comes in pieces, in small, quiet moments you do not recognize as transformation until you realize you have gone an entire day without remembering the bruise or the humiliation or the ache in your chest when the people you loved chose cruelty over loyalty. In the weeks that followed my step out of their orbit, my life did not explode into joy. It softened into peace. The kind of peace that feels like discovering your own breath again. I began waking up early, not because I was anxious, but because the morning felt like mine. Sunrise through my windows painted everything gold, and instead of bracing for conflict or replaying words that once wounded me, I drank my coffee slowly and listened to my apartment settle into silence like a sigh. I bought running shoes with cushioning so soft it felt like forgiveness under my feet, and every morning I ran around the lake trail near my building, not to escape something, but to move forward. To feel my lungs fill with air and my muscles work for me alone. The first time I finished a full loop without stopping, I sat on a bench, sweat soaking my shirt chest rising and falling, and I smiled. Not the polite smile I used to wear at family dinners. A real smile born from effort and not performance. My therapist noticed it too. You are breathing differently, she told me during one session, her voice warm, eyes soft. It happens when someone finally stops living for others' expectations. I nodded, feeling tears threaten but not fall. For so long I had carried the weight of belonging, thinking love meant endurance and endurance meant sacrifice. But love without respect is just captivity, and I had set myself free. I did not isolate myself. Instead, I let life expand around me. I joined a women's hiking group one Saturday morning after hesitating over the sign-up button for almost a week. When I arrived, a group of women in their 50s and 60s greeted me with warm eyes and thermoses of coffee. One of them squeezed my shoulder and said, "You look like someone who needed fresh air." I laughed, surprised by how seen I felt in that simple moment. As we climbed the trail, they told me stories of marriages survived. Careers changed, children raised and released, and boundaries learned through pain, not theory. One woman, gray hair braided down her back, looked at me and said, "Baby peace is expensive, but it's worth every tear." I did not tell them everything, but I told them enough. enough for them to nod knowingly enough for me to feel part of something unbroken. I bought a small condo by a quiet lake 2 hours from the city. Nothing extravagant, nothing to flaunt. A place where silence sounded like water brushing against the dock and wind moving through trees instead of tension pressing against air. My grandparents would have loved it. I placed their photo on the mantel, my grandmother's hand curled around my shoulder, my grandfather laughing like he always did when I mispronounced French pastry names as a child. Sometimes I sat by the fireplace at night and whispered to them, not like prayer, but like gratitude. You protected me. I am building the life you imagined. I did not become hardened. I became choosy. I stopped answering every call, stopped saying yes to every request, stopped apologizing for only having one life and choosing to live it without surrender. I started volunteering twice a month with a financial literacy program for young women, teaching them how to open accounts, protect assets, understand credit, and say no without shaking. One girl, maybe 19, looked up at me with determined eyes and asked, "What if your family hates you for choosing yourself?" I smiled softly, feeling that old ache somewhere far behind me. "Then you walk anyway," I told her, "because belonging that costs your self-worth is not belonging. It is erasure." She nodded slowly, and I saw a spark in her eyes that reminded me of who I used to be before I learned walls sometimes save you better than bridges. Seasons changed. Autumn arrived and painted the world in gold and rust. I walked paths covered in leaves and realized I was not reminding myself to breathe anymore. I was breathing naturally. Winter came, and instead of feeling lonely, I felt warm, safe, self-contained. I spent evenings reading not because I needed distraction, but because I enjoyed stillness. I cooked meals that smelled like rosemary and garlic, and browned butter flavors that reminded me of my grandmother's kitchen. I lit candles. I played soft jazz. I existed gently. That was the miracle. Gentleness without fear. Peace has a shape, I learned. It is not grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Peace is the quiet confidence of closing a door that once slammed in your face. Peace is choosing distance instead of war. Peace is seeing your reflection and not searching for permission in someone else's eyes. Peace is waking up and realizing you feel safe in your own life. They had not taken anything from me. They had only revealed who they were. And in losing them, I found myself. One evening near the lake, I sat on the dock with a cup of tea watching the sky turn lavender and gold. The water rippled softly, soft wind brushing my cheek where once a bruise bloomed. I placed my hand there lightly and exhaled, not in sorrow, in gratitude. I had survived them, and more than survived, I had grown beyond them. Healing does not erase the past, it transforms it into foundation, and my foundation was strong. Peace was no longer a wish whispered in the dark. Peace was my life now, and it fit me like a home I built with my own 2 hands. Closure is not a dramatic door slam or a speech shouted through tears or even a triumphant declaration to the world that you won. Closure is quiet. Closure is choosing peace even when pain echoes faintly in the distance. Closure is waking up one morning and realizing the ghosts no longer follow you, not because they disappeared, but because you outgrew the rooms they once haunted. Months had passed since I walked out of my parents' house and left their world behind. Winter melted into spring, and the bright greens of new life unfolded around my lake home like nature itself was applauding rebirth. I spent mornings on my porch with coffee warming my hands and sunlight warming my face, and in those moments I understood something deeper than anything any therapist or book or whispered piece of advice ever gave me. Peace is not given. Peace is built, one boundary at a time. It happened on a Tuesday when my phone buzzed with a number I recognized but had not dialed in months. Chris. Once upon a time, seeing his name would have made my pulse jump, not out of love or admiration, but out of conditioning, out of decades spent believing his moods governed the climate of our household. But now seeing his name felt like seeing a name from an old chapter, a character I once knew but no longer belonged to. I let the call ring, watched the screen go dark, and only when a message followed did I open it. The text was surprisingly simple. "I am sorry." I stared at it for a long moment, not frozen, not emotional, simply thoughtful. Apology. A word that once would have cracked me open, but now it sat gently in my palm. Not heavy, not light, just there. Growth looks different on everyone. For him, 2 words were a mountain climbed. For me, 2 words were a memory acknowledged. I typed back slowly every letter chosen with intention. I am healing. I hope you do too. That was all. Mercy without self-betrayal. Compassion without return to captivity. A boundary wrapped in grace. A few days later, another message came, this time from my father. He did not apologize. Men like him rarely do. Instead, he offered something else, something unfamiliar in his voice. Humility disguised in formality. We miss you. The house feels empty. I read it 3 times. I did not feel satisfaction. I did not feel anger. I felt distance clean and unsharp. I replied, I wish you well, then put the phone down and went back to chopping vegetables for dinner, tears not of sadness but of closure rising softly and then dissolving. Healing does not erase history, but it does soften the sharp edges until they do not cut you anymore. My mother reached out eventually too. Her message came late at night like a confession whispered into the dark. I did not protect you when I should have. That one pierced not wound, but touch. It was the closest she had ever come to acknowledging my hurt. I breathed in deeply, feeling the ache of little girl me sitting at kitchen tables waiting to be seen. I typed slowly, gently. I hope you learn to protect the people you love. I am protecting myself now. And I set the phone down and watched moonlight fall across my floor like quiet forgiveness. I did not need their love anymore. I did not need their approval. I did not hate them. I simply no longer lived in the shadow of a hope that they would one day become the parents I imagined. I let that hope go. Letting go is not forgetting. Letting go is freeing both sides to become who they will be without expectation. My grief did not disappear, it transformed. It became gratitude. Gratitude for learning early that loyalty means nothing without respect. Gratitude that I discovered strength not through applause, but through resistance. Gratitude that the inheritance my grandparents left me was not money, but backbone. I visited their grave one bright spring afternoon. I brought fresh lilies, the kind my grandmother loved, and placed them gently at the foot of their stone. The grass around it danced in the breeze, and sunlight spilled across their names like a blessing. I knelt, hands resting on the cool earth, and whispered softly, "Thank you. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for teaching me that quiet strength wins wars." I did not cry, not because I had no tears left, but because my heart did not ache anymore. It hummed. I stood, slowly brushed dirt from my knees, and looked up at the sky. A soft wind moved through the trees as if answering. When I returned to my lake home, evening light spilled across the rooms like warm honey. I set water to boil for tea, opened windows to let soft air in, and sat at my kitchen table with a journal and a pen. On the first page, I wrote words that came not from pain, but from truth. I did not lose a family. I found myself. I found peace in solitude. I found dignity in boundaries. I found strength in silence. I found freedom in choosing myself. And choosing myself was not a rebellion. It was a return to who I was before fear taught me to shrink. A return to the girl who sat under her grandparents' willow tree, believing quiet people could hold the world gently and still be powerful. I closed the journal, poured my tea, and stepped outside as fireflies flickered across the yard like tiny lanterns guiding me into a future I built, not inherited. And to anyone listening in the quiet, I whispered, you can survive losing people who never saw you, and sometimes in losing them, you finally see yourself. If you have ever been the quiet one in your family, but felt the storm inside, tell me where you are watching from. You are not alone. You are not invisible, and your peace is waiting for you just beyond the moment you choose yourself. There are moments in a woman's life where she finally understands that choosing herself isn't betrayal, it is evolution. If you are here right now listening to my voice at the end of this story, then maybe you know that moment too. Maybe you have lived years inside a house filled with other people's comfort, while your own heart bruised quietly in the dark. Maybe you have swallowed pain with grace because you were raised to believe that good women endure, that harmony matters more than truth, that silence is the currency of belonging. But here, this silence may keep the peace for others, yet it crushes the spirit of the woman who carries it. Dignity has a pulse, and it beats even when you pretend not to hear it. Every woman has a breaking point, not the kind that shatters her, but the kind that sets her free. If you have ever stepped away from a table where love was demanded but never given, where respect was requested but never returned, then you already know something profound. Leaving is not weakness. Leaving is choosing the life you were meant to live over the role you were trained to play. There are families that raise daughters like decorative china, polished, quiet, never meant to rebel, always meant to serve. But there is steel beneath every quiet woman, and sometimes it takes betrayal to hear the ring of that steel. You do not exist to absorb blows, apologies that never come, or expectations that suffocate your worth. You do not exist to fund someone else's ego or to carry someone else's failures. You were not born to be a peacekeeper at the cost of your own peace. We are the generation of women who refuse to go silent into submission. We do not seek permission to protect our hearts. We do not apologize for the boundaries that save us. We do not lower our voices so fragile egos can rise. We choose ourselves not out of selfishness, but out of survival. You deserve a life where you are not afraid to breathe fully, speak clearly, and live boldly. And if you feel that rising inside you right now, that whisper that says, "I will not shrink anymore," then hear me. You are not the villain for choosing yourself. You are the author of your freedom. Put your hand over your heart for a moment. Feel that steady beat. That is your power, your birthright, your proof that you exist for more than endurance. If you have ever had to walk away to reclaim your strength, leave a comment and tell me I choose myself. And if today is the first time you felt the courage to imagine walking away, leave a candle emoji so this space can light the path beside you.